we're going to start out with an apology. We're sorry to all 3 or 4 of you who have individually reached out to us asking, "Hey, when's the next podcast episode going to be up?" And I'm pretty sure 2 of them are in my dreams.
I would say, I was going to say, I don't know that I've had anyone reach out to me. So I'm going to say the only person complaining is probably just Harrison.
Yeah, probably.
And Harrison, we appreciate you.
I think at this point, my cousin Harrison is potentially our most
number
ardent.
1 fan.
I don't know about number 1 fan. Our most ardent listener is what I would probably say.
Yeah, that works.
Yeah,
I should have.
Maybe he's our number
mustache.
1 fan. We should get merch that says Harrison listens to us.
Honestly, he's got to be immortalized in some fashion.
I agree. I'm sorry. I'm going to be muting my mic on and off. Part of the reason we have taken so long is I've been sick. As a school teacher at the beginning of the year, hanging around all these teenage petri dishes, I have gotten a sinus infection and then a head cold.
Yeah.
So, and it's not COVID. Not that I haven't actually been tested. So maybe it is, but it's all like shoulders up. It's none of the chest stuff.
Yeah, we talked about it, and it definitely, like, it had symptoms of COVID, but it didn't seem like it was COVID.
I mean, the problem is that the Venn diagram, which is, I guess, foreshadowing of COVID and other cold and flu sicknesses, has so much crossover. That's part of the problem.
And each person, I feel like flu, you get flu symptoms. Cold,
Sure.
you get cold symptoms. I feel like each individual person has their own experience with COVID.
Yeah.
So like when you were talking to me, like a lot of your symptoms sounded exactly like what I experienced with COVID. But as someone with chronic asthma, also just kind of how my body decides to act regardless of if it has an actual virus or not.
Yeah. Other reasons we've been not recording is we've just been super busy.
Yeah, one of us more than the other.
I don't know which one of us you're referring to, because I feel like you're trying to hint at me, but I've been the one that's been trying to say, hey, do you want to record? And then we keep having to push off for both of us.
That's true. That's also just naturally how I am. But do we want a drum roll?
Sure.
Okay. I mean, it's your news, so
I'm gonna do this the ASMR.
Cameron's pregnant.
I'm not, but my wife is.
No, it's Cameron himself is pregnant.
You know how many times I've heard that fat joke at school?
That's
and
so
I love how you wanted a drum roll, and then I did like the ASMR drum roll, and now we're just kind of blowing over it. That wasn't a joke.
It was taking too long.
No, yeah, we're having a little baby boy due in March.
Not Cameron and I. Just
Andrew
Cameron
is pregnant with my child.
I'm actually not, although I did become a godfather.
Oh yeah, that's right. You told me about that. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. Congratulations on your actual child that you're going to have, though.
So on that note, there have been several things that I have wanted to, because I post student stories to Facebook all the time, and sometimes to my Instagram. And there have been several that have been related to my wife being pregnant, because she works at the same school. She works in the same hallway as me, even. Okay. And I haven't been able to share them with you. I've put some of them on Facebook now that we've kind of put it on social media.
Right.
My favorite one, though, and I haven't said this to anybody yet, but outside of my family, but my favorite...
I'm not ready to be a father.
Oh, no. My favorite one is when I told my classes, everyone freaks out, yay. And I had this one kid go good job, Mr. Stockford.
That that feels weird. I'm not sure why, but it does feel weird.
No, it is. Having a 14-year-old who, by the way, this kid, he's got a thick Nicaraguan accent, which is very endearing, if anything.
Okay.
And he's taller than I am. And I'm average height. I'm not short. I'm not tall. He's probably already 5'11", if not 6 foot, and he's 14. And he just shouts from across the room. Right. And he just shouts from across the room, good job, Mr. Stockford. And everybody, the entire room looked at him like, what the hell?
Yeah. It's a weird way to say congratulations.
Yeah. And so I just looked at him and I was like, thanks, man. I'm going to take that as the compliment you intended to be. Thank you.
Not the just weird, like, I don't want to think about the implications of that statement anymore.
I don't even want to.
That's okay. Moving on. Congratulations. And I'm genuinely very happy for you guys. I know I've expressed this through text and everything, but I want on record.
In writing isn't on record.
What?
Because in writing isn't on record.
Well, texts aren't legally admissible. I don't know if that's true.
They definitely are.
They
100% are.
They absolutely are. No, but you're right. I've been pushing off stuff. I don't even what was the topic last time that we recorded?
Oh gosh. Let me look it up. Hold on. Spotify.
It's been
I know it was like a month ago. A little bit more. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Oh, the last time we talked was whether or not Kamala Harris could win after Biden dropped out.
Oh, that's right. Which more on that later. But I
let's
think
skip the later and let's just go straight to now. I mean, you were saying we got a lot to cover, and I agree.
That's true.
We sure do. And
I was also busy.
7.5 minutes.
I was doing volunteer work that took up a lot of my time.
Yes, that's true. We've both had an expanding role at church recently, which I think is awesome.
Yeah.
It's great. It takes up a lot of time and it can be draining in a good way, but I think it's good.
The volunteer work that I was doing was with Eugene Pride. And now I'm the chairperson of our committee responsible for distributing funds for camper. Oh no. Why did I just cut out there?
Nope, you're fine.
Okay. My headphones made a noise and I don't know what it was. Anyway, not important. So our topic today is the absolute just wiping of the floor.
Oh, I thought you were going to say dumpster fire, and I was going to get ready to agree with you.
I wouldn't disagree with that, but the dumpster I think is maybe what we would what's our topic today, Cameron?
We're going to talk about the most recent presidential debate, and I know that we are a week late as of recording. We are recording to the day a week after, and part of that is because
has it really only been a week?
I know, it feels like a whole lifetime has gone by in that amount of time. Hashtag 2024 living. Anyway, but yeah, we're partially have put it off because we've had life stuff going on, but I feel like I've had more time to digest everything, and my initial thoughts. You've
had more time to change your mind.
I'm going to say digest, because some things I have changed my mind on, having now taken a step back and looked at things a little bit differently from a few different perspectives, like I usually try to do.
Selectively.
I don't think so. I think you're mistaking my pushing back on things, which I do for everything, for selectively changing my mind. I do say I still think I would say maybe 60 or 70% of what you and I talked about as we were live chatting, live texting about it. Actually, no, I would say 70 to 80% is probably the same. I still feel 70 to 80% is about the same. What I've changed on, I think, is how I feel about the overall circumstance, not so much about the individual claims and everything, if that makes sense.
Okay. Wait, okay, so you're saying how you feel about the circumstances changed,
Yes.
but the individual claims hasn't changed.
Correct. So what I mean by that,
that's literally exactly what you just said. I
know.
was making sure I was listening. But that's
you
also the
pulled
part
you
that
pulled a Trump and a Harris. They both did that several times in the debate where they just said the exact same thing over again. They totally did. You cannot. That's Harris's thing. And I'm not saying it's bad. I watched a speech.
It's not though.
No, hold on. I watched a speech analyzer and some Harvard guy who teaches public speaking was talking about how the reason she says things over and over and over again is her way of getting around saying the word or other filler words.
Yeah.
And
yeah. I mean, as somebody who says I also do that a lot.
But I think that makes sense to me, that's why she says the same things over and over again. Where most people might pause and try to not say a filler word, she just cycles until she gets to the next point that she can do.
Yeah, I mean, I think the candidates had time limits, and they actually, I think, did a fairly good job, both of them, of sticking to those time limits.
I agree.
And I think when you have that, and you're not allowed notes, this is totally ad hoc, these debates. I think it is, I can understand, like, reiterating certain points. What I thought you were saying was that she's just reiterating stuff that Trump said.
No,
because I know that's also something that people have been saying, which I think is not untrue, but it's disingenuous.
What I would say for that is up until the day of the debate, she hadn't really published or talked much about mini plans.
Right. I think that was intentional, but
I agree to some degree. And we can talk about that in a minute, but I think sorry. The greater point that I'm trying to make with that is I think oh gosh, I had a brain fart. Lost it.
Oh no. Well, then on that note, why don't we talk about the lead up into the debate? Because I think going into it, I fully expected exactly what Trump ended up doing in the debate.
Yeah, I got exactly what actually, you know what? No, I got a slightly better version of Trump than I thought I was going to get.
That's okay. That's
no, even you said that. Even you texted me and you said, you know what? Trump's doing better than I thought he would.
Yeah, no.
At the beginning.
My surprise there was not that I was disagreeing with you. It's that my bar was so low. And he did a terrible job at the debate. I think everyone kind of agrees that he lost that debate. I mean,
more or less.
Yeah, I've Fox News has said it. Right wing politicians have said it. I think that we can just start off from there. Trump lost the debate. It was a bad performance by him.
But I think it was on par or a little bit above what most people expected. Like, I didn't see a Trump at this debate that I didn't expect or didn't see in previous debates, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, there were definitely things that happened that I didn't expect, but that's just because what I did expect was just some level of unhinged lunacy, and which we did get.
From both of them. She started screaming at one point.
Did she?
maybe not screaming, that's a bit of an over exaggeration, but she started like yelling in that microphone. And you even text me, no, Kamala, no.
Okay, you're gonna have to remind me.
So what happened is she had her talk, or he had his talking point. She had her rebuttal. He had his response, and that's how the format had been the entire time. And she wanted to respond to his response, even though that had not happened the entire night. And she kept interrupting the moderators, saying, "No, I don't want to talk about that. No, I want to talk. No, I want to talk." She got louder and louder, and yeah, I'll send you the clip.
I mean, maybe I'm just misremembering. But all in all, I think both the candidates did do a good job of sticking within the rules that were established for the debate.
I agree. Yeah, and I think a good amount of that is the moderators actually muting them.
Yeah, but I mean, compared to any debate, I think Trump actually did a much better job of not trying to circumvent that rule. Now, what he said when it actually was his turn to talk, that's where the unhinged expectation fully came to fruition. But going back to my original point, so my being as objective as I can, already fully knowing that I'm going to support the candidate that's not Trump. My concern going into the debate was around like specifics, and not really knowing a whole lot about Harris, other than just the basics, and I think that was kind of intentional because since she received the reins from Biden, she's had, I mean, the DNC was kind of a foregone conclusion, but still something that she's going to be focusing on. She's also focusing on or was focusing on picking her VP candidate. So there, I mean, I can understand why there hadn't been a whole lot of time to like lay out specifics, but the morning of the debate, her campaign posted on their website a pretty comprehensive list of goals and plans.
I still haven't
and stuff.
checked that out. I'm gonna pull that up right now, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's when I say comprehensive, it's comprehensive of the goals and the ways in which that they would like to do them. It's not super detailed on the exact like specifics, but also keep in mind this is her campaign website. It's for the masses. It's not for legislators and cabinet members and people that are going to be very, very involved with the specifics. So I think that was kind of intentional, knowing that she was going into this debate where people kind of really still they don't know a lot about her. They don't know a lot about her plans. They might know about her as a prosecutor, but I do think there are a lot of opinions and a lot of things that she wants to distance herself from and has changed her mind about, which I'm all for. I think, we should only be celebrating people changing their minds once they receive new information. But I think it was really intentional that they posted, like they announced their plans essentially the day of the debate, so that if there was any criticism in the debate about you don't have a plan, she can just point right back to the thing that was posted that morning, instead of saying something, I don't know, absolutely ridiculous, like I have concepts of a plan.
Which I think is hilarious. And that reminds me of...
It is.
I texted this to you, but it reminded me of that episode of The Office where they're searching for a new manager and Will Arnett comes in. And he's like, I've got a 3-point plan to double your productivity. And they're like, okay, what's the plan? He goes, I can't give you the plan.
I can't give you that.
Until you
I'd be
hire
giving
me.
it. Yeah,
He's like,
you guys are
I'll
trying
give
to
you
steal it.
right. He's like, I'll give you one part of one step of a plan. Color code said documents.
Yeah. No, I
So
mean that's exactly what it was though. It was I have the fact that he said I have concepts of a plan, but I don't have that plan because I'm not the president right now is just absolutely buffoonish and hilarious
I would call
and
it a gaffe.
tells you everything. I would not.
I mean,
Because
no. Here's why.
I
Here's
also
why.
don't think that he does have a plan or a
Sure,
concept of a
sure,
plan.
but I think, yeah, I think what the reason I would call it a gaffe is because he probably meant to say something that had a similar meaning, but a little bit more gracefully, and that's what he actually did say. And when you look at
Yeah.
the idea of I haven't had if he had said something similar, right? Of I have thoughts about it, but I haven't had a chance to sit down and make a very specific step-by-step plan yet with my advisors. That is a much more acceptable answer. It's the same thing.
100%. 100%. I would have, given the benefit of the doubt had he said that. But
right. And so that's
it's
where
him.
this well, no, more so I think this is where choice of vocabulary comes in. Right? I mean,
I don't.
I talk to my students. Oh, hold on, it says trying to reconnect. Does yours say that?
You're getting real grainy and
is mine good now? It says I'm good now on my end. So I'm going to go with it.
Yeah, I can still hear you. I just can't quite see you.
Yours has been going kind of grainy for me on and off too. I'll go with it. One of the things that I really work with my students on is using academic language versus non-academic language. And to that end, I think this is a great example of why using academic versus non-academic language is extremely important, particularly in instances where you're trying to run for a major political office.
Hold on, you're now sound like a robot.
Sorry, had some technical difficulties there with internet, specifically with some updates running in the background. Anyway, what I was saying is this to me seems like a case of academic versus non-academic language, because if you look at him saying, I have the concept of a plan, but I'm not president yet, versus saying, I have a general idea, haven't sat down with my advisors yet, that's something I plan to do when I get elected. That's the same thing. He's saying the same thing, but it comes off way less prepared, way differently. Well, no, here's the thing, right? The intent is the same, the message is the same, but how it's received is going to be way different.
But I also think it speaks to something that is true in that Trump wasn't prepared. His preparation was essentially just PR coaching with Tulsi Gabbard and JD Vance, both of which are not super great at PR in their own right.
I mean, Tulsi Gabbard has gotten a lot better because she became a big name as someone who was... No, she's become a pretty big name among conservatives.
That's
because
not
of
PR, though.
No, but what I mean is she's had a lot more PR experience. She's had a lot more interview time, a lot more time in front of a camera since the 2016 election, especially since she left the Democrat Party.
More than Trump, though?
No, not more than Trump, but I would say...
I don't think anyone's had more time in front of a camera or more chances to practice PR than Trump.
But compare how Trump talks and how he acts in front of a camera to how Tulsi Gabbard or JD Vance does. They both interview great, and they answer questions fairly... I think they do, and they answer questions fairly directly, while still maintaining the amount of vagueness that they might need to save themselves later on. Trump just kind of dances around in circles, sometimes answers a question, sometimes goes off on something else entirely, right? And Kamala Harris does the same thing, but I think what you said is... Yes, she does. The importance of the passage of time. The importance of the passage of time. Come on. She said that in a cycle over and over and over again, man. You can watch the video.
I'm not saying that there aren't other examples I can think of where she did, repeat the same thing. I think the difference is that I think it was a Freudian slip when Trump said, "I have concepts of a plan,"
And
but I
that's
think it
I agree.
really
That's why I
did.
say it's a gaffe more than anything. That doesn't mean
But
you're not
Gaff,
wrong and that it's bad.
okay, yeah. I guess then there, I think really what the issue was my interpretation of the word gaff. I
Okay.
think what it speaks to is that Trump doesn't have a plan. He's never had a plan. He surrounds himself with a lot of other people who do have plans. Um, those people, to me, are really what's frightening, and it's that's why I think Trump would be so. That's why I'm so concerned about possible second term for him, and that's something that I think Harris said very well, which and utilized in this debate very effectively, is how easily manipulated Trump is. Uh, and she went right out of the gate with trying to get under his skin, and it worked. And she knew exactly how to do it because she's a prosecutor. That's her job. And he fell for the bait, hook, line, and sinker every single time. And I think that's why she, by almost all accounts, won the debate. It
So
wasn't that her ideas were necessarily better, it's that she was very effective at showing how easily it is to rattle him. And if she can do it, Putin can do it, Erdogan can do it, Netanyahu can do it. All these people. He played right into her hand.
So I agree, and there's a lot I want to unpack with this. And so first, I want to go back to the beginning of this and say that I agree with you. Harris won the debate. I agree that it's because of how she conducted herself compared to how he conducted herself. I really like that you said it's not necessarily that she had better ideas. I think some of her ideas are better, some of them aren't.
I mean, yeah, I think that her ideas are better. Having read the statement that they put out on her website, before the debate, but I also don't think, I want to make it very clear, I understand that she left a lot to be desired for people who were looking for specifics in her plans.
Yeah.
I think that was intentional. I think it was very effective. I think it was a really, really great way to approach this debate.
And I think what you said that really stuck out to me the most so far is the idea of preparation, because I think that's absolutely what this came down to, was how they prepared. Because you are right. Trump basically just sat down and talked about the topics with Tulsi Gabbard and JD Vance, and that was pretty much it. But at the same time, that's all he's really had to do to debate up until this point. I mean, if you look at the GOP primaries when he debated against them in 2016, the whole thing was a crap show. All he had to do was be top of the crap pile, and
Yeah,
that
which he
wasn't
was. It wasn't everyone debating. It was everyone else debating against Trump, and
right.
he just had to be there essentially.
Exactly. And then you look at him debating against Biden, he just had to be awake and talk in semi-complete sentences. That was a really tough debate for Biden, simply because, for no other reason than his energy levels. And so for him, that's all he's ever had to do. So he just said, it's worked so far, let's stick with it. I think Harris definitely had better preparation, because she, from what I've read, not only did they have straight up mock debates where they made her
Oh
stand
yeah,
next to someone who asked questions, but they went so far as to have one of her staffers dress up and imitate
yeah,
Donald Trump's mannerisms so that she could be prepared for how he acts and responds. And
yeah.
like, I mean, credit where credit's due. That's the kind of preparation that you need going into debates. That's the kind of
Eh,
preparation that you need to do when you're going into something on a big national stage like this. So
exactly. Also, just to add to that, it's her job. It's what she made her career on. It's what got her to the vice presidency, was debating criminals.
See,
Was making her case against people who are at least alleged criminals. Trump is a confirmed criminal, but that's what her career was made on, was making a case, not necessarily needing to, prove everything, but sowing enough, uh, uh, not doubt, because she wasn't a defense attorney, making it so that the reasonable doubt was out of the question. If
yeah,
that makes sense.
I think that makes sense. And I think her goal, and this is something I talked about with my students. So really quick, I had a really great discussion with my students about this. What I did was I gave them bingo cards, which I also sent to you. Every debate, there's a lot of different news outlets that put out bingo cards. I found the ones that I felt were the least biased, either way. And
yeah, I thought your bingo cards were great. I thought the vocab that you went with it was a little skewed.
To be fair, I made that in 15 minutes. And so for me to pound out all of those vocab terms in 15 minutes, I did my best,
Yeah. I think your explanation of Medicare is the only one that I thought was like objectively not objective.
Sure. And as I was reading over it again later, I was like, I could have done a lot better on this one. I could have done better on that one, but again, 15 minutes for like,
for
what
15
was it, 45 words. And
it was
some of them I had like a paragraph. Like I feel like I did pretty good. Anyway, so I made it extra credit because I knew that a lot of students wouldn't be able to, have access to it. But, we had a discussion before the debate and after the debate. And one of the things I told my students, which I think turned out to be 100% true, this actually, I feel like I predicted the future a little bit, was I said, this is her debate to lose, right? Everyone knows what to expect from Trump. She's going in with an advantage because we don't know what she's going to do. Yeah. She hasn't interviewed well previously. This is her chance to really show people, hey, I can actually stand my ground. I can actually think on my feet without my vice president right next to me, because she has not campaigned well ever.
Yes.
She does not do well with interviews when it's thinking on her feet, when it's not scripted. And the interview she did with CNN was 100% scripted, and she had her vice president right next to her the whole time in case she started messing up, and that wasn't very good optics. This is what she needed. But I think,
if I can take issue with one thing,
sure,
it wasn't that she needed to prove that she could hold her own. She has done that in her career. I think it was strictly the personality and the likableness.
Sure,
and I think there is something to be said about the fact that she is a Black woman. Even, I know that she's some of our listeners may have only found out recently that she is also Black. But she's a Black woman, and women, and especially Black women, historically have a stereotype placed on them of being erratic or being, whatever the bullshit stereotype is that you want to. I'm trusting that we all know what they are. I think that she, a lot of people had placed those same stereotypes on her, in lieu of us actually being interested as just, a proletariat electorate.
I don't know about proletariat. That's a very Marxist term that I really take issue with.
I think I meant electorate.
There you go.
Yeah.
Civilian, we might even say.
Yeah, she needed to endear herself to people who were not so much the people that are consciously biased, but the people who are unconsciously biased, which is all of us. And I think she did a really, really great job at that.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, and I texted this to you and to my friend Haley, that, hey, she's rocking this, and I think she did. I think you hit the nail on the head there. Another thing that we talked about in kind of our post discussion in a couple of days in my civics class, because there's a reason we're talking about this in my social studies class. It's not just because I want to. It's a civics unit for my 8th graders.
Right.
And we talked about the reason you do debates and interviews is to show off your personality, show off your policies, and to show off your ability to think on your feet. And
yeah,
I mean, there's more reasons to it, but those are the big 3 that I really wanted them to hammer down when we're talking about like campaign strategies and the purpose of doing these things, how they choose to spend their time. Yeah. And I think she did a good job at showing off her personality in contrast to Trump. I think she did a good job of showing her ability to think on her feet in this particular situation, because she had this stereotype of not interviewing well, not thinking well on her feet. And a lot of moderates who were undecided voters were looking to see, hey, if I have to choose between someone who is kind of erratic and says crazy things but can think on his feet, and a woman who can't think on her feet, even if she's a little bit more like, I don't know, a little bit more able to think things through, I'm going to choose a person who can think on his feet in a Cuban Missile Crisis kind of situation,
Well, okay, but I think more I think really what it is, though, is Trump might have looked like he could think on his feet, but I think what this debate did was illuminate the fact that that's the only way he can think. There is no preparation for him. There is no deeper understanding of issues or deeper thinking, critical analysis of things.
I'm going to push back on that significantly.
Something.
We don't know what he's doing. I mean, we can't say that a man who has been president of the United States has never been sitting there critically thinking or devoting time to thinking about policy. Just because he doesn't have it ready for you, or just because he doesn't say it to you right then and there, doesn't mean that he's not. If we're going to say that,
it's the things that he does say, though, that make me think that.
But again, if we're going to say that
he.
If we're going to say that Harris,
go ahead.
If we're going to say that Harris is doing this same thing of thinking it through as she's talking and being able to think on her feet that way, and if we're going to point out the problems of Trump not having these plans specifically laid out, but we have to point out that Harris is doing the exact same thing. Right? She could have released all these plans before, but she did it the day of, right? Which tells me that she's been scrambling to play that game of balance between going against President Biden while also supporting the administration that she's a part of. And that's a hard thing to do. But they're both doing it, and if we're going to call out one, we got to call out the other two, I think.
Sure. But I think it's different, because what I'm saying is I think Harris clearly showed that she is thinking about these things. She's doing the prep. She's thinking about stuff critically. Trump is, I think, never done that once in his life. I honestly think, and this is coming from his own family member who is a doctor of behavioral psychology. He has an undiagnosed learning disability akin to ADHD, and I think that he frequently, he can't pay attention to things long enough to gain a deep enough understanding to be able to think critically about it. And what we saw was, that's why I'm saying he is good at thinking on his feet, because that's all he has. It's also why he's willing to believe absolutely 100% false and absurd and harmful things that he's seen on Twitter or on poster boards at press conferences, or just Fox News. And I think what we saw was each candidate's ability to think critically, even though really, I mean, the debate was them communicating what they think about issues on the spot. It also let us see how they think about things and approach topics and you know issues critically behind the scenes, because they don't have notes.
So, but the key thing I want to point out here is ultimately all of this, anything that you do on a debate or in an interview, comes down to optics. How does it look? And just because, now, to be fair and to your credit, it does often come across that that's all he's doing is thinking on his feet. And to some people, that's a pro. To some people, they say, you know what? I want someone who's able to do that really quick and make those kind of quick decisions, whether they're good or bad, whether they're well thought through or not. That is something
I want
that some
somebody
people
who's able to think on their feet and come up with a good thought. I don't want somebody who can just make a decision very quickly. That's a dangerous individual. That's impulse. That's being impulsive. That's not what I want from a leader.
So two things here. The flip side of that would be someone who took several months to release any stances on anything and has a history of not thinking very well on her feet. Now, the other thing I do want to point out, though, hold on, let me finish my thought. The other, because I think you're absolutely right in that optics, when we look at how people are perceived from debates, you're 100% correct. And that's how Trump is perceived as this, especially by people on the left and a lot of people in the center. He's perceived as someone who's not having these critical thinking sessions as he's formulating these thoughts. However, one thing that I try to push my students to do, one thing I encourage everyone to do, is not just look at the optics, but try and consider the outside context of what we're not seeing, right? And I will 100% push back and say that he's not critically thinking about any of these things ever once in his life. Even if just taking the exaggeration, the hyperbole out of that, I think as a politician, he's had to think critically.
He's not a politician.
As a president, he has had to think critically about these things. Just because we don't see it, just because it doesn't come out when we look at his interviews or his debates, doesn't mean that he's not. I mean, look at the
I think our standard for what critical thinking is may be different then.
Maybe
thinking really hard is not what I'm talking about.
No, what I'm saying for critical thinking is considering different outcomes, different possibilities, different solutions for a problem, and trying to analyze not just what all of them are and their implications, but also making a decision about which one is the best possible with the least amount of damage.
And so you think that he displayed that well, even though he
No, I'm not saying he displayed that well. No. What I'm saying, that's the part where I agreed with you. I don't think he displayed that well. I think that is one of his common debate and interview problems, especially with, as you brought up, like his tweets and social media, like that. The optics of it, I agree. But I think to say that as president he has never had to do that is far-fetched at best.
No, he has done. He has had to do that. What I'm saying is I think that there is a lack of ability. He is not capable of thinking about these things on a nuanced level in the way that a world leader, or really anyone who has any amount of power, should be expected to do. And I think that you can find evidence of that in his Twitter statements, in his business dealings, in all aspects. He has never had to practice actually having a nuanced and informed opinion on something and make a case against that, because he is very good at working around the necessity to actually have substance. So that's what I'm saying.
So what I would say to that is I mostly agree, especially when it comes to the perception of it, the optics of these things. When we look at
optics, he's great at.
I would say optics with his core audience, he's great at. When it comes to appealing to moderates and appealing to Democrats, I would say he's terrible.
Yes.
I
That's
don't
why
think
he has the people that he has in his campaign and
sure
surrounding him, because they're much
right
better at all the rest of that stuff.
for sure. I would say, but what I mean to say here is when I look at the Trump that I see in interviews and debates, and then when I look at the Trump that I see sitting down with NATO, telling them, hey, you guys got to step up your contributions or we're going to have to pull out because it's unfair, and how he's fielding their questions and concerns, like, you should watch that video. I was shocked. I was like, this is the Trump that we need
I
to
would not
see
count
when
it
we
as
do that.
addressing concepts and concerns.
Maybe we saw two different videos, maybe there's a couple different ones, but I remember watching him do that, being like, wow, yeah, this is the Trump that we need to see when he debates, when he does interviews. This is the level of preparation that we need to see in everything else if he really wants to convert people to his cause, if he wants to get people to rally behind him more. Right.
All right. Well, it sucks that at least for him then, that Biden last year did achieve the goal that Trump said he would be able to do day one in terms of NATO, which is, I think, 2% of contributing of NATO members contributing their 2% of their GDP to NATO. I think that there's only one that isn't, and it's like 1.94%.
Sure.
So Harris can take that one.
The problem with doing that is Trump is easily going to say you're playing off of all of the groundwork that I laid. And I'm not, you
Right.
can argue whether or not that's true, right? You obviously can make that argument each way, but the reason she's not
that the whole thing.
Exactly. Right.
Also, America is a lot of times the aggressor and the instigator for a lot of the things that NATO needs to be, responding to. It's, I mean,
like what?
Within, I mean, just like the foreign, and I'm not talking about recent history. We didn't cause
it is recent history. It's not that old.
I'm saying we have a history of being provocateurs rather than saviors.
Sure.
We're not other countries in NATO, a lot of times their safety is put at risk because of either things that we did or things that happened to us.
I mean,
so
if you're
yeah, we should be paying the majority of the bill for NATO, and it's ridiculous to say we're going to pull out of NATO if you guys don't give us this amount of money, because the other thing is that while this is very much not always the case, there is some truth to money isn't everything.
If you're talking about like the 1970s and maybe the 80s, sure, but
I'm talking about 90s. I'm talking about
with what?
Afghanistan, Iraq,
which are problems that are more rooted in European colonization and forced trade than with American instigation.
Okay, Iraq,
European colonialism
caused us to start a war over false pretexts.
Okay, so
and rope in our NATO allies for that?
Again, oh my gosh. We don't have the time to go into this history because we want to focus on the debate.
I get what you're saying. I do get what you're saying. But
right, because our acts of provocation.
We owe more of the bill, I think, to NATO than other countries, and at the same time, the amount that is owed shouldn't, like, that's kind of the antithesis of the whole NATO pact.
I don't know. I mean, you've lived in Europe.
Your alliances shouldn't be contingent on how much money you give. It should be contingent on the.
Here's my thought, right? Because like you've lived in Europe, I've lived in Europe. I lived in
Ireland. That barely counts.
I lived in Poland when Russia took the Crimean Peninsula. While that was also happening, they were flying drones from Königsberg over to like Gdańsk and northern Poland in the Baltic Sea to kind of like, strong arm, to show the flex, like Russia likes to flex. And, you know, I went to church and I still have friends who live there who work for NATO. And I don't want to speak for them or put words in their mouth. I want to be clear. But when I talk to people who are living in Europe, expatriates, you know, native Europeans, I cannot tell you how much they depend on the United States for their protection. If Russia were to roll through and invade, it would take us a long time to get there, for one. I mean, to mobilize our troops that are already there would be difficult, and then to get more troops over there would take a good amount of time. Sorry, to mobilize troops that are there wouldn't be difficult, but it would still take time to get them from where they're at to where they need to be.
I think it would take a lot less time than the average person would expect.
Yes, I mean, we're talking days instead of weeks like in the 40s and before.
I think it could be counted in hours, but
depends on where it is and depends on what troops you're talking about. But if we're talking about enough to make a counteroffensive or even a defensive line, it's going to take several days, if not a couple of weeks. But the point is, why should we be Europe's army, Europe's defense, and have such little expectations of them, right? That's my issue. And so
we're not.
Well, hold on. If we're pulling I understand that the United States, and yes, we totally are. If the United States is pulling 50% of the weight as a country the size that we are, the rest of the continent should be pulling 50% of that weight, considering it's their land and they are also approximately the same size, and we balance it out. But I don't know. I think having lived there and seeing how much these people like thoroughly depend on the United States for protection in any kind of military conflict, they, at the very least, even if it's not monetary, they need to be doing more to like amp up their own military defense and presence. Like, and it's less to me about we should do less, and more to me about they should be self-sufficient in their capabilities, in their capacity.
Okay. Israel.
Not NATO.
Still one of our allies and still should be using their large military industrial complex to commit the war crimes that they are committing, instead of us providing them with weapons, funding, absolvement of any responsibility. The other thing is that it's a now. I think we need to move on because
let's pull it back to the debate. We're getting too far off.
Let's pull it back to the debate. I would really like to talk about. We've talked a lot about Harris.
Yeah,
I want to talk about Trump.
Hold on. I feel like we have talked a lot about Harris to talk about Trump, if that makes sense.
Well, yes, and that's part of it. Like before this recording, you and I were texting about you're frustrated that Harris isn't receiving the same treatment over fact checking that Trump is.
Yeah.
To which I would say, of course not. Harris didn't lie the way that Trump did. And I want to take a look at some of those. I want to take a look at some of those lies, Cameron.
And so do I. I've pulled up. Here's another issue that I want to bring up. I've pulled up CNN's fact checking of the debate.
Yeah.
And I was reading through it while I was sitting there before this. And not only do I have problems,
they had 2 that they fact checked her on, and
no, there's like 5 or 6. There's like there's. I mean, this is a highlights one, so it's.
You're right. I was looking at both of them. But I think the one I'm talking about is the Associated Press.
Oh, gotcha. So no, I mean, they fact checked her on several things, and they fact checked him on several things. I would say it's the article.
Just went silent.
Oh, how about now? Oh,
sorry, my headphones died. Give me 1 second.
No.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to add another marker. I put a marker where it started.
Okay, let me open up another beer. Just in prep. Okay.
All right, so I just sent you the article on your phone that I'm looking at, and it's not just that I have a problem with the fact that they fact-checked Trump more than her. Obviously, I understand he is making some wild claims about people eating pets in Springfield. but
not our Springfield,
Springfield, Ohio. But also with the way that people are being fact checked, that they're fact checking him versus her, right? I mean, just looking at this article,
I feel like that's such a red herring.
Listen, no, it's not. It's not. Here's why. Look, I've got an example right here. Okay. The majority of things that Harris gets fact checked on, even if they turn out to be, and in their explanation, are straight up false. They say, it needs context, and then the context is, yeah, this is pretty much not true at all. And then Trump, they'll say, this is false. What? And then they'll say, oh, but it's actually kind of true. So like, I'll give you an example. Okay.
I think that has more to do with your interpretation of what you're reading rather than how it's being reported.
Okay,
because when I read those, I get the opposite thing.
So then maybe it's both of our interpretations of what we're reading. Maybe we're both reading. Because
I think that there's an inherent bias. I think that I think we both could do a better job. Sure. Acknowledging our bias.
Here's an example of my problem. All right. For Trump, all right, when he said, I had no inflation, virtually no inflation, right?
Which is not true.
Correct. But they say this is false. Cumulative inflation over the course of Trump's presidency was about 7.8%. And that sounds like a lot. But then it says inflation was low at the end of Trump's term, having plummeted during the COVID-19 pandemic. The year-over-year inflation rate was about 1.4% the month that he left office. And when you look at what a healthy amount of inflation is, it's 1 to 2%. So if we look at the idea of what inflation should be at compared to getting out of control, virtually no inflation compared to the 6-7% that we're seeing sometimes under Biden is saying, yeah, that's virtually no inflation. So I would say this needs context, not this is false. All right. But then we look in the same article.
I would also say him saying that he had no inflation is also false.
Though. But then he clarified and said virtually no inflation. And again, that comes down to context. I think so.
Is it clarifying if he says, see, here's the issue I have with just that statement. Yes, the inflation that he had that was very high was due to COVID. COVID wasn't over by the time he left office. We were just starting to see some like reemergence into the market as a country. And immediately after he left, yes, it did go up to about 8%, which is pretty fucking high. But the other thing that it doesn't say is that inflation may have been lower at the end of his presidency after, we had kind of seen stuff increased by COVID. But what it leaves out is at the expense of things that we desperately needed to address the COVID pandemic.
So like what you're saying then is,
which he lied about doing everything he possibly could on that stage.
So what you're saying is it needs more context.
Yes, but I don't.
Okay, because that's what I said. That's what I agreed with.
But what I'm saying is that context, if we do look at the context, it's not going to be in Trump's favor.
And that's fine. I'm okay with that. I'm not disputing that it should or shouldn't be. My disputation is how they are wording it in a bias against him. So for an example for Harris, right? And this is one that I think is labeled how it should be labeled, I will say. But I think this is comparable in level of truthiness to what Trump's is, where she said that the president, because of the Supreme Court ruling, she said, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. And that is not true. I mean, it needs context. And this is from Chief Justice John Roberts wrote the president enjoys no immunity for his unofficial acts, and not everything the president does is official. The president is not above the law. End quote. To me, these are the same level of lie, the same level of stretch, the same level of truthiness. They are.
Because John Roberts is the one that John Roberts and the other Supreme Court justices are the ones who get to decide what it is that's an official action, and they can go fuck themselves. They have already they've already shown their hand and shown that they have no intention of holding him accountable, and they keep pushing it off because the Supreme Court justices are very smart people, unlike Trump, but they're doing his bidding for him.
So here's the problem. That is a separate issue. I'm not going to dispute that. I think there's a lot wrong with some of the stuff that the Supreme Court's done. Even if, again, I'm not disputing what you're saying as true or not true. What I'm saying is what Kamala Harris said and what Donald Trump said are both should be labeled, this needs more context, because what you just said is the context that allows her to be correct. And what you and I both said is the context that allows Trump to be correct. What I said is also context that allows her to be incorrect. What you said is context that allows him to be incorrect. You're right. And I'm not going to deny that. But what I'm saying is if we're going to say that this needs context when there is a specific caveat in the decision that says there are a lot of things that the president will not be immune for, whether it's left up for interpretation or not, and should be left up for interpretation or not, aside.
It's also just factually context. What Roberts said is also factually untrue, because there are things that were listed in the things that would not be granted immunity in things that were official, part of his official capacity as president, where they still gave him a pass.
So what you're saying is this needs more context.
I'm saying no. What I'm saying is
because that's my problem. I think they both should be labeled needs more context, but we have one that's labeled this needs context and one that's labeled this is false. I think partially true, partially false.
I think what I'm saying is that it's kind of like arguing with a toddler. Not arguing with you is like arguing with a toddler.
Oh, it is. It 100% is.
I mean, likewise. I'm sure likewise. What I'm saying is there's a difference between you telling a toddler, we're not going to do, you're not allowed to do this, and here's why, and that toddler not understanding, versus the toddler just continuing to ask you why. And then you give them an answer, why? When give them an answer, why? It's one of them is the context that is required is drastically different. And I think that should be taken into account.
And I think that's also correct. And I think that is something that should be listed when they say, hey, we're going to fact check this. Context is needed. Here's why this particular context matters. And we get that with Harris. We do get that when they fact check Harris. We don't get that when they fact check Trump, if that makes sense. And so my problem is not that they're fact checking
because the things that
no, meaning like they don't say the nuance of the context and why that context is important, to what degree that context matters. We get that when we fact check Harris.
Because what he's saying has no truth to it.
We just said that there is some truth to what he said. We both just agreed that there was some truth to what he said about inflation.
There was.
See, but this is my problem.
Right? There is a kernel of truth.
Sure.
That does not mean if I have one good kernel on a corn cob and the rest of it is eaten by weevils, am I going to say that corn cob? I'm gonna take a second look at that corn cob.
Okay, but we're not. But here's the thing: it's not just one. I picked the most easy example to have this particular discussion about. Right? It's the same when we look at his. And I know you want to talk about lies. I know this is one of them, so maybe this can be the segue in. The claim about migrants eating people's pets. 100% false. Absolutely false. But
and JD Vance even said, I made it up.
Oh, he said that as a joke, to be fair. But
you don't get to make that joke.
That's fair. But the coverage that I was
also, he completely made it up.
No, because the coverage that I saw on ABC right before the debate showed a town hall meeting of Springfield where a lady said, I watched them pull my dog out of my yard and cook it in front of our house. Now, did that happen? Probably not. And she, in other interviews, has said, I was not expecting this to go like this. This actually didn't happen. I was caught up in the moment, and she was seeking attention. And which is what I think most of us expected when we heard these kinds of rumors. But to be fair, had someone only seen that clip of a person making this claim of this happened to me in my house or in my home or at my place of residence, and we don't have anything to the contrary yet, I can see how, had he not seen or not read the rest of it, how he might have run with that. Now, I'm not saying he should have. I'm not saying he should have at all.
No.
And my first thought was, I don't know that that's true. But if we're talking of people who are, like, we both agreed that Trump is impressionable when he sees these kinds of things. I 100% agree with that. If you're seeing it
honestly,
on the news
and you
don't see the full
Trump
context,
for this one because he had all of his people telling him that. But
that's what I mean by that. Sorry.
Okay,
keep going.
Okay. I want to say on behalf of my sister, who is the assistant city attorney for Springfield, our Springfield, not Ohio,
Springfield,
Oregon, the real Springfield, according to Matt Groening, or Groening. I don't know how you
Greening,
say
I
his
think
name.
it's pronounced.
Is it?
I think it's
you guys know. You guys all know who we're talking about. He has said we're the real Springfield. And also another attorney friend who listeners of the show are very familiar with, the front man for Halcyon Club, Andre, is also an attorney and has to go to like city council meeting things a lot of times, and will send us, like, because all of these are on Zoom for the public, so I'm not getting anyone in trouble. But both of them will send me just like the most absolutely unhinged people that come in to talk about like public commentary. So if you've ever been to a public hearing or like your local government, city council meeting, school board meeting, county planning commission, that kind of thing, you understand that a lot of it is just wackadoodles. And Trump took that and took what one crazy person
there's a lot of crazy people, but yeah.
I mean, okay, but Cameron, please log in next time that there's a Springfield Planning Commission meeting. Why don't we live stream commentary during it?
Oh man, I don't know. I guess I don't live there anymore, so maybe we could, and I could just.
I mean, the craziest person there is going to be my uncle, who apparently a lot of people on the committee or just in the city hate, and rightfully so. He's a piece of shit.
Oh wow. Anyway,
he is a person that I do not respect.
Sure.
And have a lot of reason not to respect. Anyways, the fact is that a normal person would take that with an amount of skepticism. And not only do I think that I don't necessarily think that Trump did anything more than neglect. I think he did neglect to take it with a grain of salt and have a healthy amount of skepticism. I do think he's guilty of that. I don't think he's guilty of what his team did, specifically JD Vance, Jim Jordan, whoever else, Lara Trump, Loomer, people that he's surrounding himself with. I think what they did is a much more grievous transgression, is that they willfully chose to take that story and weaponize it, which was incredibly dangerous to not only just, the electorate, but also to the people that they were saying these things about. I mean, essentially what I'm saying is that they're guilty of libel and slander,
Sure.
and also potentially hate crimes, because they were pinning a specific ethnic group as the culprits for something that they well knew was not true. And how anyone could stand behind a candidate who has those kind of people on his team, but also a candidate who willfully spread those rumors, hasn't taken it back, hasn't shown any remorse, hasn't offered any clarification. How is there a choice?
Well, and for me, when I see, okay, full disclosure, I used to work at a campus news outlet.
A dog and cat processing factory.
Yes.
In
No,
Springfield, Ohio. Sorry.
No, but to be fair, I worked at a news agency through college. It was the campus newspaper, later news magazine, and
I just want to make it clear, for BYU
Hawaii, right? But we focused mostly on local news. We didn't really deal much with national or even international topics unless they were related to our particular community and student.
But I do feel like there's an inherent bias in a religious school for a certain side of politics.
Okay, but again, we didn't really talk about politics. You should look at it. I can. Oh,
what did I do?
It's okay. You're good.
Okay.
No, but you should look at it. It's very much like what's going on with staff and students and the community around us. There's
right. I'm more talking about just like worldview and how things are.
Right. And having been the editor-in-chief of this paper, I can tell you that at the behest of the staff advisor, we work hard to teach and make sure that we edit in ways that show the least amount of bias in any way. Like that is one of our goals. And
that's a goal for every legitimate journalism, but no one succeeds at that because it's an unattainable goal.
Oh, dude, that's not even the point of why I'm bringing this up. Why I'm bringing this up is to say one of the greatest lessons that I learned while working at this award-winning newspaper. No, seriously, we won awards not when I was editor-in-chief, but when I was part of the team. Every year we won awards, and then they also just recently won awards at national college newspaper competitions this year. They just posted about it. But one of the greatest lessons I learned was wait and see. Anytime somebody says something crazy, anytime something big happens, wait and see. And 9 times out of 10, I promise you, 9 times out of 10, if you're looking for it, because the follow-up, the context rarely gets nearly as much attention as the outrageous thing that happens first.
Right.
The viral side of it doesn't get always gets way more attention than the explanatory side of it.
Yeah.
But 9 times out of 10, when you look at the explanatory side, when you look for that deeper context of what's happening, it's not nearly as crazy or as big a deal as what's going on. Now, the reason I bring that up is I think that this doctrine of wait and see should have been applied when looking at they're eating dogs in Springfield, Ohio. That should have been a clear, let's wait and see moment, not a jump the gun. Yeah, they totally are moment. That should have been a hold up. Let's just see what goes on. You know?
I think for me, it should have been it shouldn't have been a let's wait and see moment. I think it should have been this is just absolutely not true.
The reason I do say it should be a wait and see moment is because there is that one time out of 10.
Yeah, but if that was happening, it would have been a story that would have broken the news way before it reached the debates. If you're finding out about a news story during because of the one of the largest events of the presidential campaign, a presidential campaign that a lot of people are really, really invested in.
Mm-hmm.
If it were true, or if it were at all as heinous or ridiculous as that would have been had it been true, you can probably assume that there's no merit to it. Also, I feel like that let's wait and see mentality is a lot of the reason why so many people have not understood just what a buffoon and just joke Trump is.
See, and
they keep waiting to see, like, you know, maybe there's something else going on under there. You know, maybe he does have a plan, or, you know, giving him the benefit of the doubt. He is showing us exactly who he is.
Okay.
He has his entire career.
But at the same time, and
yet you still have a butt.
Yeah, because
you still have a butt to that. How do you have a butt to that?
I have a specific example. Well, first of all, that's just part of normal human anatomy.
But how?
I have a specific example for you.
I still feel like you're defending him, even though I know you're not.
So here's the thing, right? I mean, look, I'm going to stand up for what I think to be what the system should be, right? I think the system should be fair and equal for in this context, fact checking, or fair and equal representation in media, right? And let's be honest, I mean, you look at the number of liberal news outlets out there that have a reason, a fiscal financial reason to make Trump look terrible, and compare that to the number of conservative news outlets who have a fiscal financial reason to make him look like a savior. It's not balanced in Trump's favor. And because of that, it often makes me feel, and I feel like this too sometimes, like, am I defending Donald Trump? When really what I'm defending is the concept of looking at the full side of the story, if that makes sense. And because Trump is usually the hot topic when we have these types of conversations, that's why it seems like I'm talking or in defense of
you want to play devil's advocate.
Correct. It's not that I'm defending him. It's that I'm trying to push back on things. And in addition to this wait and see kind of mentality that I have, that I'm going to stand by, you make a good point that sometimes wait and see.
We've waited and we've seen. Let's
hold on.
Make a decision then.
Well, here's the thing, right? Sometimes when we've waited and seen with Trump, it has come out where we were like, oh, actually, that's not as bad as the media says. And a specific example I have for you, which is one that we've talked about before, and I know that you're still going to take issue with it. But the specific example I have, which was brought up in the debate by Harris, when she said that Trump said that there's fine people on both sides talking about white supremacists. And when you watch the video, he specifically says, except for the white supremacists and except for the racists and the extremists who should be condemned completely.
No, because that's not all. That's also not exactly what he said.
Maybe not a word for word quote, but that is what he says. He specifically says, excluding these people who should be condemned. He says, who should be condemned completely. That is something he does say in that. And
then every opportunity he possibly could have had after that statement was made, he chose to not condemn them, including when he was specifically asked to condemn them, when he was specifically asked to clarify in the 2020 debates.
And he even did later. He said, he finally said, yes, he did. He said, do you want me to do it? Fine. Because here's the thing.
He said, do you want me to do it? Fine, I'll do it. Proud Boys, stand back and stand by. And that was his denunciation.
So here's the thing.
So that's not him condemning. What I mean and I think what Kamala Harris means when she said it on the debate stage is, yeah, maybe in that moment he did say a tiny bit of words that that would allude to him saying that Nazism shouldn't be condemned or should be condemned.
Here,
However, everything else since then, and with all of the context that we have, it tells us
I don't
otherwise.
think so. Because here's the thing, like the question it begs for me is if they very vocally and vehemently lied about that one particular clip, what else are they cutting out and lying
they're
about?
speaking to the larger context.
No, they cut out the larger context to fit their narrative. That is very different, right? Now, here's the thing. As someone who professionally repeats himself every single day, thousands of times, I have a meme on my wall now about how much I have to repeat myself that the kids keep looking at and being like, oh. Like, I should not have to repeat things over and over again. I should not have to be 2 months into my school year. Hold on. You would think I'm just talking about the students and not the people that I've been team lead over sometimes for the last few years.
Yeah, but you don't have a monopoly on having to repeat yourself to other people you work with.
No, and that hold on.
You do have a monopoly on having to repeat yourself to children.
And what I want to say when I say this is it's not necessarily that I have had to, specifically, I'm not trying to say any of the people that I work with are terrible because I've had to repeat myself to them. As someone with ADHD, I have to have things repeated to me. But I should not have to say...
I'm also not saying that. The people that I think are terrible that I work with are terrible for other reasons.
Well, here's... What I mean is, as an example, right? We're halfway through our second month of school at where I work. I should not have to remind my kids, get your notebook off the shelf before you sit down. And yet every day I have to say it 4 times for every single class period. Okay. Now,
I would have been one of them.
Yeah. And you know what? I get it. They're kids. But when we talk to adults, it's the same thing. We should all know that the highway speed limit's 55. Why do we need a sign telling us every quarter mile? Why do we need, so it's not just kids, right? It's adults. Everyone constantly in our society feels the need to be reminded. And if we don't remind you, then they say, oh, well, you didn't remind me, so I'm out. I don't think anybody should have to constantly, in every single interview, say what we all already know to be true, that white supremacists are crazy and terrible, and that extremists should not have a huge place in our politics, right? I don't think anybody should have to say that constantly. I think that's something that should just be understood. So if we agree that nobody should have to say that, then why are we demanding that from someone who did say that?
Because it left enough of a doubt in our mind that the rest of us needed confirmation. And then when asked for that confirmation, he only doubled down on not giving the confirmation.
Yeah, because he
did. You're right. He did say in that clip after Charlottesville that I'm not saying that the fascists and neo-Nazis they're bad. He said something to that effect.
He said should be condemned entirely.
Yes. And then he said, but there's good people on both sides. But what I'm holding on to, and what I think a lot of people are holding on to, is that what he was saying is this group should be condemned. The group that were there and that are still speaking out or not speaking out in some cases strategically, they're still fine people, even though they support what these other people who should be condemned are doing. And then when given the opportunity, multiple opportunities, to clarify what he meant in no uncertain terms, he chose not to do that. He chose to not outright condemn.
I don't think he should have to.
Lester, when asked by, but he did have to.
No, if
he did
done
have
it
to
once,
because Lester Holt was asking him in that debate, would you condemn them now? And he said, oh, I don't know who they are. Or I don't know. That he dodged the question. He should have just said, yes, I will condemn them now. He should have just said outright, neo-Nazis should be condemned.
But he
didn't do that.
But we're not
But he
talking.
didn't do that.
But we're not talking about the entire everything here. We're talking about one specific instance where one person was treated very differently than how anybody else would be treated.
I don't think we are.
Oh,
How
yeah,
are we
we are.
How is this different?
Okay. So
he was you're saying that he wasn't treated fairly when asked about this incident.
Yes, and I'm saying this is an example
even
of
even if we agree that he wasn't, he was later. And he continued to double down. And that's why we keep bringing it up. That's why we keep interpreting it, is because he told us what he thought, maybe not in that moment, but he did later. And that speaks back to what he said in the past.
So
and
what
he
you're
hasn't
saying
recanted
is,
it. He hasn't done anything to change it. He has maintained that line.
So what you're saying is,
yes, he supports neo-Nazis.
So to bring it back, what you're saying is, the first time when we had the cut clip, we should have waited to see if the clip had been cut and edited as it was. But then after that clip in its full entirety came out, we should have waited to see if he actually meant it and stuck by it.
And he did. Yeah.
Right. But you were just saying the problem with the wait and see is that people wait and see for too long. And I'm saying, maybe people weren't waiting and seeing long enough.
No, what I'm saying is, even after he failed to condemn that, even after all of the shit that he's pulled, even after he said that Haitians are eating cats and dogs, which is absolutely false, even after his 34 felony convictions, his 9 lawsuit, or I don't even know how many lawsuits are still in the works, even after his 1 civil sexual assault ruling, even after all of this stuff, people are still saying, let's wait and see. What are you waiting to see? What is it that you need to see? So, I'm not talking about you. I'm using the royal you.
No,
but
I know
like,
what you mean.
What are people still undecided about? So, what is it that would convince them that
I feel like
he is the fraud that he says he is?
I feel like I've already answered this, and I don't want to go back and say the same thing over again. So let's move on, and let's do. Yeah. I know you had some specific things that I interrupted you to start all of this. What are some of the specific things?
Oh no, I think I was just talking about the dogs.
Oh, that was it. That was the one thing you wanted to get at.
I was so excited to get to that, and we did.
I will say, presidential bingo. The one comment, because I didn't just give it to you. I sent it to several of my coworkers as well. And the one comment I got from the majority of them who played debate bingo was, kind of wish Eating the Dogs was on there. Like, how would we have known? How would we have known to expect that?
No. I fully knew because that morning, or not that morning, I think the day before, Jim Jordan had tweeted that, and then was on some kind of he was on it was some kind of committee meeting about asylum seekers.
Sure.
And Swalwell, who's also on that committee, they had like family members of asylum seekers who or immigrants whose families had been killed or otherwise negatively impacted. I don't even think negatively, just otherwise impacted by our immigration policies.
Sure.
And Jim Jordan tweeted it, and Swalwell totally roasted him during the committee. So I definitely expected that. The one thing, I know we're running out of time. The one thing I want to say, I was really, really expecting Trump to bring up the border czar name.
He did.
Did he?
I don't think he said, it's funny that you mentioned this because I was scrolling through the fact checking and I just stopped where this is. He said, remember that she was a border czar. She doesn't want to be called border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. And so there's 2 sides to this. She isn't. One is, yes, she never said that herself. And the White House has consistently said, we're not calling her that. However,
no. The White House has always said, that's not her title. That's not what she was
that's what
charged with. She was in charge of 3 countries. And since then, their levels of immigration have been record lows. So she was effective at the part of the border that she was officially charged with dealing with as vice president. So
I'm not going to
stop the debate there.
Well, no, that's not what I take issue with, because I'll be honest with you, I don't know enough about the border issue at this time to have a meaningful conversation about it, so I'm not even going to try.
Yeah.
But what I do want to say is, even though, to her credit and to the White House's credit, they have consistently said, this is not the term that we should use, this is not what it is. It did take off with leftist media, and it was all over. I mean, you can go see compilation clips. So, I mean, I understand why he's using it. I understand why she's sticking to, hey, that's not me. But at this point, I feel like as a colloquialism, we understand that this actually was something that people were calling her, whether they should have or not.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's I think the only reason that I know that she wasn't the border czar is because I kept hearing it.
Yep, that's a great way.
Yeah,
to see that. Yeah.
It's only until I finally looked into it that I was able to understand the difference between border czar and what her job actually was. Which I think you and we agree on that front. I think it's unfortunately, this is a tactic that in the last 6 months, I feel like the Trump campaign has been using, which is to condemn or just villainize immigrants because they go on and on about immigrant crime, when the fact is 91% of the people detained at the border for crimes are actually, I don't know what my facts and I don't know the exact facts and figures, and I may be misappropriating certain ones to other ones, but majority of people detained at the border for crimes and for drug crimes specifically are white American citizens.
Right. And that's part of how the operation works, because at least nowadays, is because they can ideally or theoretically cross the border more quietly with less hassle.
Yes, but that also includes the people that they've caught crossing the border illegally. They don't have drugs with them.
Sure.
They're also, I think the rates of crimes committed by various ethnic groups, white people are above Hispanic people, who have, are presumably the ones that Trump is saying have committed crimes. So all in all, what I'm saying is the facts and figures say that migrant crime is not a thing. It's not a thing that we've seen happen. It's the only purpose that it serves is, and I know you hate this, it goes back to the checklist of what do you do to create a fascist country, and that's creating a villain that people, creating a scapegoat that people can. I mean, that is one of the checkpoints on the list.
Yeah, but I'm not going to I'm not going to bring up then how the Democrats have been villainizing the Republican Party since 2009.
That's not an ethnic group.
And
that's a group that you can change at any point. You can decide you're not a Republican.
It does not have to be
but
ethnic.
At any time you can choose not to be a Republican.
It does not have to be ethnic. That is the problem, right? So if we look at a dictatorial state and we look at how people have created an other, when we specifically look at the two outspoken, self-labeled fascist governments, specifically Italy and Germany, right? Yes, it was very much a race-based thing. But when we look at these other dictatorships that were communist in name only, fascist in practice, essentially. And I still don't entirely agree with that definition, but for the purposes of this discussion, we'll stick with it.
I also don't agree with that, because they weren't.
But they weren't communist. Right. That's why I'm saying communist in
practice.
that's why I'm saying communist in name only, fascist in practice.
Oh, sorry. I thought I had that flipped.
Oh, sorry. Okay. The others became political enemies, right? And it's a lot easier to do that when your political enemies are outspokenly against you. And so my problem that I have is I was actually just talking to a friend about this today in regards to the second assassination attempt on Trump, which I don't want to get into because we don't have time for that in particular. But as someone who lives in a red state that has voted red in every election except for President Obama's first term, I mean, I see a lot of Republicans saying some weird stuff, and I do not see anything in my local area. There's always stuff online. There's always viral Twitter posts and other stuff, but I have not seen the same level of vilification and calls for violence from the right as an establishment, as politicians, as an establishment, as I have from the left.
That is not the experience that the majority of the country has also had.
And here's why. And what I mean is, I do see it happening. I'm not going to deny that. I see both sides talking about, hey, we need to do some crazy stuff and sometimes calling for violence. The difference is, I see the left getting away with it, right? Biden has said several times we should put Trump in bullseyes and crosshairs. I wish I could take him behind the gym and beat the hell out of him. Dude,
that's okay. Biden first of all, I've never seen him saying that we should put him in crosshairs. If he did, okay, fine. That's fucked up.
He did. I've got it right here. Okay. This is a BBC article from July 16th of this year. U.S. President Joe Biden has said it was a mistake for him to say, time to put Trump in a bullseye, days before Saturday's assassination attempt on his election rival. He said that before he got shot.
Biden definitely shouldn't have said that.
But it's not just him. It's Eric Holder, who said when they go low, we kick them. It's Maxine Waters, who said if you see anybody from the... Yeah, he did say that. It's on video. I can send it to you.
I'm not saying that I'm saying that this is a false equivalency. But I'm saying that you, honestly, if you have not seen the active calls for violence coming from the right...
I'm not saying I haven't seen them.
But if you think that it is in any way equivalent to the perceived equivalent from the left, I think you're not paying attention.
I think...
Not to mention the two people who shot at Trump. One of them at some point was a Democrat, but was also a Republican.
Both of them were Democrats when they... or had been donating to Democratic causes at the time of their attempt.
Donating to Democratic causes. They were both registered Republicans.
At some point.
The most recent one, Ryan, what's his name? I don't learn their names because I don't want to give them credit. He was he's exactly the kind of person that I think the Republican Party caters to.
I think he used to be
attractive to.
I think he used to be, and he's changed since. Because I was reading up on him recently too, and I think you're absolutely right. Up until a few years ago, he was like there's even social media where he's saying Trump's the best, Trump's this and that. But he's significantly switched.
He voted for Trump in 2016.
But he has significantly changed his narrative since then. But that's not the point. The point of what I'm trying to get at is I'm not saying that I don't see these calls for violence. I don't see them happening. That's not what I mean to say. What I mean to say is I don't see the same reaction to them. When it happens on the right, it gets shut down, pulled down, as it should.
Because they're actually dangerous.
But when it comes to stuff coming from the left, it's coming from actual leaders, actual high up people. And I'm not saying it doesn't on the right, but it does from the left significantly more, and it's accepted and encouraged in many situations.
No, I don't think it's accepted. I don't think it's encouraged. I think what it is...
The worst thing that's happened to any of them is you shouldn't have said that.
It is given I do think that it is given a grain of salt, but that's only because because of the context with which the far right has around actively
Look,
being actively violent.
and I could go into, well, let's not talk about a lot of the riots that have been happening. I'm not saying they're not warranted in some cases, but look, we don't have to.
Only one group has done an insurrection. The riots around George Floyd and the opposition to the police officers were in response to an ongoing state of a specific group being habitually targeted
I agree.
unfairly
I
by
would
law
100% agree.
enforcement
I would
and
100% agree.
was civil disobedience in the truest and most
doesn't excuse all the people's livelihoods and lives that they destroyed because of it.
Nor should it. MLK, I think himself said, civil disobedience doesn't excuse you from the consequences of your actions.
Sure.
But it is necessary.
However, I would argue, and I'm not going to try and compare the veracity of this. I'm not going to say that what people are going through, what Republicans have been going through in how they've been labeled and talked about by the left is anywhere close to what African Americans have gone through as a people in our society. I'm not trying to say that. What I mean is people act the way you talk about them and the way you expect them to. And we have had a long history of speaking poorly and expecting poor things out of our, minority groups, and then we are surprised. I don't think we should be, but we're surprised when they riot and have problems, right? We've been talking
also
poorly.
The things that we're saying about them are not true, though.
I agree.
Migrant crime is not happening.
I agree.
Migrants are committing crimes at much lower levels than white people.
That's not the point that I'm trying to get at. The point I'm trying to get at is we have also been talking poorly about Republicans in general since about 2008, but explicitly so.
I think deservedly
2014.
So.
I disagree.
Deservedly so.
Here's the thing. Again, if you're going to say deservedly so, that's the same kind of language that makes people act the way that you are saying is
no,
bad
it's not.
to act. It is. If we just both agreed that if you talk about people in a certain way and we have certain expectations for them, that's how they will act.
No, when you talk about people violently. I'm not talking about them violently. I'm saying that I do not respect them, that I do not think that their ideas are well founded, that I think that they should crawl in a hole and not come out. That's not the same as saying I want to put them in that hole. That's not the same as saying they don't deserve to live. That's saying
that's not what
they're
I'm saying.
Dumb.
Yeah, but when you have a group of people who are being treated like crap for years and years and years,
being treated. They're being treated by crap in media and social media. That's the true of anyone who has ever gone on social media or has ever been in the media.
But when it's so one-sided, because again, like we just said, I mean, there is a huge liberal bias in media.
It's one-sided because one side is wrong.
No, it's not. We don't have time for this debate.
Fuck around to find out.
No, we don't have time for this. I'm going to call this right here and say that we're not going to finish this particular topic.
Sorry.
It's fine, but what I'm trying to say is I have seen a significant uptick in these kinds of things from the right as they've been talked about and treated like this. And so I think when we look at people saying you're stupid, you're terrible for years and years and years, they get quiet, they stop voicing their opinions, and then we get one single media side because that's all that's selling, because the other side gets told your opinion is terrible, you're stupid, you're an idiot, go crawl in a hole. We when we tell people that, they get upset, they make rash decisions, and they follow people who make other rash decisions because they sound like them. That's exactly why Trump got elected in 2016. That's exactly why when Trump had his crazy rhetoric at the end of the election, people went to the Capitol and did what they did, right? It's because people felt like they had their right to have their own opinion. They felt disenfranchised with their right to have their voice and their own opinion heard. And when we get surprised that crazy things happen, I don't think we should be surprised.
Okay. And I'm sorry. I was getting worked up.
You're good. I get it. I understand.
I do agree with what you said once I gave you the
chance to
opportunity
say it.
I think what I'm speaking to is what I'm speaking to is yes, there should be, I mean, everyone needs to be nicer to
Yeah,
everyone. That's a fact.
overall.
But after so long, and after, I mean, basically just after a certain point, when do you start calling a spade a spade?
Well, that's
And
what I think I'm trying to do, right? Because I'm saying, yes, the violence and calls for stuff
yes,
is happening on the right, but it's
you
not being
are.
condemned when it's happening on the left, right? When Maxine Waters says, if you see people that work for the
I
Trump
think it is.
administration, you leave. She got a slap on the wrist, and that was it. Whereas when it happens on the right, their careers end.
No. Trump, I mean,
I'm not
Trump
saying
called
Trump.
for,
And
okay.
that's part of the other problem, right? That's part of the other side of the problem is when it's happening with these big people, like the only people who really get away with it, who are systemic, is Trump. The entire left leadership gets away with it.
No. JD Vance has gotten away with it. Mike Pence got away with it. Tucker Carlson has gotten away with it.
I don't pay attention to Tucker Carlson, so
if you want me to go on the other side, Elon Omar got away with it a few years ago with anti-Semitic stuff.
Yeah.
Everyone gets away with it, but what the difference is that if I understand the point that you're making about us being a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you treat me this way, then eventually I'm gonna I'll have no other chance but to act this way. But that's also not an excuse.
So I think based on what you're saying, then maybe my issue is not necessarily with how it's being treated, but maybe with how much of it we see in the media, right? Because if the left has more media exposure and we're going to see more of it than when it's coming from the right. So maybe my issue is less, is it being handled differently, and more how much attention is being given to it, I guess.
I think it is being handled differently, but it's being handled differently because of the severity and the circumstances, and just that, I mean, I think personally, like, I fully understand the media is left leaning, but I think personally, my viewpoint, and I mean, I'm sure that there is something to support this. That's not just anecdotes, but anecdotally, I am pretty sure that this is true. It's because left-leaning media, at least, you know, what we think of as left-leaning media, is blatantly false and intentionally false less often.
See,
you look at the big names in the right-wing media, how many of them have lost lawsuits because of their lies, or because of slander, or because of libel? A lot of them.
See, but
how many of them are, quote unquote, not news but entertainment, to skirt around those laws, versus all of the other news organizations that people say are biased and left leaning? It's like, well, yeah, they're biased because they're the ones that survive, because they're actually somewhat following the rules. So of course they have bias.
Not to get too much into this, I think that I think that it's less about who is right or wrong more often. I think the court cases in particular have to do more with.
No, I think it's about who's doing their due diligence and not.
So still, I think it's less about that, and I would say the court cases come down more to chosen hyperbole than that, and that's not to excuse it. That's not to excuse it. What I would argue is the bigger issue with why there's bias is what type of person this sort of career attracts. And when you look at
someone who's educated, yeah, I would totally agree with that.
let me finish. When you look at the kind of people who take careers in writing or photography, really things that are creative in general, those are people who tend to be more liberal, statistically speaking, right? And when you look at people who do more manual labor, less creative, they tend to be more conservative. And
Okay.
and so when we look at what kind of person, right, no one's going to go from manual labor on a ranch to, working as a journalist, right? That those are two very different lifestyles that attract two very different kinds of people. But
I don't know if that's true.
well, you know what I mean. What the point I'm trying to get at here is the kind of person who's attracted to a job as a journalist is statistically more likely to be someone who is liberal than more likely to be someone who is conservative.
I think it's statistically more likely to be somebody who is educated, and people who are educated are, and within academia, are statistically more likely to be left leaning, not the other way
Yes.
around.
That's the same thing that I'm saying, right? I'm looking
No,
at.
you're saying that people who are left leaning are more likely to be educated. I'm saying that people who are educated
No,
are
no, no,
more
no.
formally educated.
Well, then maybe I
People,
misspoke, because what I meant is the type of person that this particular career attracts is someone, and you're the one who brought in education, but
yes,
typically when they're
because those
looking
are
at,
those require education, formal education.
I would say only on paper. You don't. I mean, like you
That's
don't.
the
If you can
formal
write,
education that I'm
I
talking
know,
about
but what
is
I'm saying is
specifically on paper.
if you can write, you can be a journalist, right? But what I mean
No,
is,
that's absolutely not true.
all right, let's never mind then. So there's one thing I wanted to say before we end, and that is,
Okay.
I don't think. Well, no, I don't think. I wanted to ask how you think the debate changes or affects what might happen politically moving forward. So maybe give me like 2 minutes what you think on that. I'll give 2 minutes what I think, and then we can call it good, because this
Okay.
has been a long one
Yeah. Yeah. A fiery one.
at times.
I think it bolstered Harris for those of us who still were supporting her, but need to see a little bit more to fully back her, which I think has been confirmed by her donation since the debate. I think it definitely has swayed a lot of people either from the Republican side who were going to vote for Trump, but also a lot of swing voters. However, I think what Harris needs to do now, I mean, it's her election to lose now. What she needs to do is now she needs to really get down in the nitty gritty about her plans.
Yeah.
Because there's a certain contingency of undecided voters who didn't care about the personalities of the candidates and just wanted to see detailed plans. Trump isn't going to give them that satisfaction. So Harris needs to just be detailed, be specific. Go stop campaigning against Trump now. Start just campaigning for yourself.
I agree with a lot of what you said. I do think for her base, it definitely bolstered a lot. I don't think anybody who was already going to vote for Trump changed their mind. I don't think anybody who was already going to vote for Harris changed their mind. I do think there's a small number of moderates or undecided voters who probably switched, but that's what I thought coming out. And then a lot of my friends who are moderates who have gone back and forth were posting on social media about how after the debate, they were unsure of her. And I don't want to put words in their mouth, so I'm not going to like say anything about what I can't remember exactly what they said, but I've had a couple different discussions with people who said, going into this debate, as someone who voted for Biden, I was going to vote for Harris. And now I'm kind of like, I don't know. Her polls are higher and her campaign fundraising is definitely higher. Her donations are higher. I think it's good for her in those senses. But what's important to remember is debates and polls are not, they're good indicators to see like maybe how you're doing in a specific state, but they're not good indicators of an outcome of an election. Yeah. I mean, Obama lost he lost most of his debates. He wasn't a terribly great debater. And
I would disagree. I think he was deemed to have lost the debates.
That's better. But I mean, you can watch. I showed clips of the Romney Obama debate to my students when we were looking at what are debates like now versus what did they used to be like. And I also showed them a couple other like older clips, like the Reagan Mondale debate.
Yeah.
And I think for me, I think neither one of them really come out on top with the moderates. As a moderate myself, who was already thinking I don't like any of these people, so again, they're saying a little bit, but they don't mean much when it comes to actual election day. So I'm going to take a wait and see approach. I think it is her election to lose right now, as you said, and I think that's less because of anything she's done and more simply for the sake that she's not an old white man. She's got the youth factor to play.
She's also very accomplished and capable.
That is true.
That also adds a lot. It's not.
I'm not trying to diminish any of that, even though I do personally have issues with her time as an attorney general.
I do too. But she did spend a lot of time as an attorney general, and not a TV host.
So yeah, fair. But don't take what I'm saying to diminish what she's done. What I mean by that is there's one thing that I know for a fact most people wanted out of this election, and it was someone who was not super freaking old, and she has that factor going for her.
Yes. And those people have nothing to complain about, and so that leaves me wondering what is still the holdup, I think.
And so the holdup, I think, is exactly what you said, the specific plans. Because even though Trump hasn't...
I feel like they even though Trump made their decision before she became the nominee.
Here's the problem. Even though Trump hasn't said his specific plans, he already has been president, so we know what kind of things to expect. Good or bad, he can at least point to a history as president.
Thank you. You're proving my point for me.
Right.
We know what to expect.
Sure. No, and I for better or for worse, we know what to expect. And he can, but that means for better or for worse, he has a history as president he can point to. She does not. And let's be honest, the vice president doesn't do a whole lot other than sit and wait around for the president to die.
I couldn't name a single thing that she's done as vice president. I'm sure she has done stuff, but
it's mostly whatever the president asks you to do in the president's name. So
no, I mean there's Senate, stuff.
Yeah. Some minor. There's a few things, but the point is like I agree with most of your idea of where the stance is right now. I think it's a much closer race in her favor than it was going into the debate. But that was before the second assassination attempt. Yeah. And we still have a month and a half to go. Anything can happen.
I mean, yeah. I think that's fair.
I have a fun fact for us.
Oh, okay.
So why don't you do our closeout, and I'll do our fun fact.
Okay. Well, if you click below, we are donating to the Springfield, Ohio Haitian Animal Rescue. No.
I thought it was a restaurant. You saying it's a rescue?
It's a little both. I immediately want to cut that part out. No,
we'll decide maybe.
Yeah, well, we can decide later. Thank you to Halcyon Club. They are, like we have talked about, they are coming out with a new album. I got sent the demo version of the album the other day. It's fantastic. And I hope you guys will check them out. We of course want to thank them for letting us use their song, This Life is Tough But Fair, off of their EP, Headset Emotions. We will let you know about their upcoming album, but like I said, it's great. It's their best work yet. So if you haven't already checked them out, please do so.
For your fun fact, John Quincy Adams. No, wait. James Monroe? I'm going to start this part over.
Okay.
For your fun fact. Max the Meat Guy, YouTuber, cooked every president's favorite food and ranked it on a scale of 1 to 10 with him and 2 other people and averaged that score out and then averaged that out across parties to see which party has the better favorite foods. And the Republicans trounced the Democrats when it came to
of course
best favorite foods. So much more meat. There was so much more meat.
Yeah.
I mean, Abraham Lincoln's favorite food was straight up bacon. That was it. Yeah. Bacon, one ingredient. And then how's Obama going to compete with broccoli? That was his. Just broccoli.
Because when the Republicans were the like party of Lincoln, they had all of the money in those states to be able to get like the good food. And then by the time that like slavery ended and stuff started to switch, and more Democrats started getting elected, they were able to I don't know what I'm talking about.
I don't know. Also, multiple presidents liked squirrel stew as their favorite
Honestly,
food.
I've heard squirrel stew is pretty good.
I don't know, man.